The hives were not dormant, they were patient. Scans had labeled Sekkar a graveyard world, shattered obsidian spires clawing at a rusted sky, plains of glassed sand swallowing every footprint. Dead, command declared. Safe, but the first Pathfinder team heard the whispers. Beneath their boots, the ground hummed, a subsonic thrum that bypassed audio receptors and vibrated straight into the marrow. They planted the seismic beacon anyway, its steel spine plunging into the crust, because orders were orders and dead things did not learn. By dusk, the tremors began, not random quakes, but patterned, staccato rhythms that matched the squad's own encrypted comms. The hives were listening, adapting. When the swarm erupted at midnight, it moved as a single entity, carapaces glistening with freshly secreted acid, limbs evolving mid-strike to bypass plasma fire. The team's final transmission lasted 9 seconds, screams, the wet crunch of armor, and a childlike clicking that analysts later deemed coincidence. Command sent more Pathfinders, better armed, better trained. They scorched the tunnels, salted the vents, and left beacons humming in their wake. But the hives did not die. They studied. They remembered. By the third orbital strike, the swarms emerged wearing the scars of previous bombardments, slagged metal fused to exoskeletons, EMP nodules grown over old burns. Now the mission briefings omit the word sterilization. They speak instead of containment, of buying hours, not victories. Pathfinders no longer ask why the beacons flicker or why the strikes always arrive too late. They know the truth buried in every shudder of the earth. This is not a war. It is a dialogue. And humanity is losing the vocabulary. Chapter 1. The dust of Sekkar was not like the dust of other worlds. It did not whisper or settle. It hissed, corrosive and restless, scraping against Jori Halen's visor like a creature testing the limits of its cage. She adjusted the filtration unit on her collar, the mechanical click echoing too loudly in the dead air. Her squad moved behind her in practiced silence, boots sinking into ash-gray dunes that stretched to a horizon fractured by jagged obsidian spires. Alien architecture, the briefing had called them, monuments to a species that had buried itself deeper than the planet's molten core. Jori's gloved hand drifted to the seismic beacon strapped to her thigh. It hummed faintly, a reassurance. Protocol demanded they plant it at the hive's epicenter, where the crust was thinnest, where the orbital strike would liquefy the tunnels and everything inside. Simple, clean. A good soldier did not question the geometry of duty. Corin walked 3 paces behind her, his posture a study in calculated indifference. She did not need to turn to know his expression, the sardonic tilt of his brow, the too-sharp focus of a man who saw systems as puzzles to dismantle. His reputation preceded him, the disgraced tech savant who had rerouted a fusion charge to save a collapsing orphanage, sacrificing a strategic outpost. Command had stripped his rank, but not his skills. Now he carried his tools like sins, clattering in their holsters with every step. Do not trust him, her lieutenant had warned. He believes mercy is a virtue. The spire loomed ahead, its surface pocked with hexagonal cells that pulsed faintly violet. Bioluminescent residue, the scouts had theorized. Fossilized venom, Corin had corrected during the briefing, smirking when the room fell silent. The hives communicate through chemical trails. Interrupt the signals and they will adapt. They always adapt. Jori signaled the squad to halt. Here, her voice crackled over the comms, toneless. The beacon's display flickered as she knelt, its interface casting a sickly green pallor over her hands, coordinates aligned, depth calibrated. She entered the activation code, the keys chiming like a funeral dirge. Nothing happened. The hum died, the display darkened. Corin was beside her before she could speak, his breath fogging his visor as he tore open the beacon's casing. Electromagnetic surge. The hive, it is jamming us. His fingers danced over the circuitry, a surgeon navigating a corpse. They have learned. Reinitialize the system. Jori's throat tightened. Protocol demanded redundancy. A second code, a backup charge. It will not work. Corin did not look up. The interference is algorithmic. They are not just resisting us, they are rewriting. The dust hissed louder. Somewhere beneath them, a low-frequency tremor shuddered through the ground. Jori's pulse echoed it, a drumbeat syncing with the planet's malignant heart. She stared at the dead beacon, its silence a verdict. 5 years ago, on the ice plains of Tarkus, she had hesitated. A child's face, pale and pleading, had flickered in her scope, a half-second delay. A squad wiped out. Now the machine's failure felt personal, a cosmic mockery of every order she had clung to. "We fall back," she said. "Regroup at the extraction point." Corin laughed, a hollow sound. "The ship will not wait. Command programmed it to detonate if the beacon is not active. A failsafe." She turned to him, her visor reflecting his gaunt features. "You knew." "I read the mission parameters." He snapped the casing shut. "Unlike you, I do not skim." The tremor deepened. A crack splintered the ground near her boot, venting a sulfurous stench. Jori's helmet sensors flashed a warning, biomass detected, ascending. She unslung her rifle, the weight familiar, a limb she had never learned to live without. "Then we defend the site until dawn. The strike must launch." Corin's eyes narrowed. "With what? Your faith in bureaucracy?" "With what remains." She turned to the squad, their faces obscured by helmets, their loyalty a given. "Dig trenches, set charges at the spire's base. If the hive breaches, we funnel them." They obeyed. Soldiers always did. The spire's shadow. Night fell like a blade. Sekkar's twin moons cast overlapping silhouettes, transforming the dunes into a chessboard of light and void. Jori crouched in the eastern trench, her rifle's scope scanning the obsidian plain. The air tasted of rust and ionized metal, a metallic tang that seeped through her filters. Corin worked beside her, his hands buried in the guts of a salvaged drone. He had stripped it of its surveillance gear, repurposing the motor into a makeshift detonator. "A kinetic trigger," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "The hive moves in waves. Stagger the blasts and we might mimic a retreat, confuse their collective mind." She did not answer. His voice was a distraction, a ripple in the stillness she needed to think. The squad's charges glinted further out, silver discs half buried in the dust, a fragile perimeter, a prayer in steel. The first tremor struck at 2200 hours. A geyser of sand erupted 50 meters west, disgorging a dozen chitinous forms, spindly, jointed limbs skittering over glassine carapaces. Drones, scouts, the vanguard. Jori exhaled, her crosshairs settling on the lead creature's thorax, where the plates overlapped like fractured armor. She fired. The round punched through, spraying viscous ichor. The drone collapsed, its legs twitching in a grotesque ballet. The squad opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the night, casting strobe-light shadows. Corin's detonator flared, a chain of explosions that flung sand and chitin skyward. For a moment, the advance faltered. Then the second wave came. These drones were different. Bulkier, their carapaces studded with bulbous growths that pulsed in sync with the spire's residual glow. Corin cursed. "EMP nodules. They have armored the weak points." Jori's rifle sparked, then died. A drone lunged at her, serrated mandibles gnashing. She smashed its sensor cluster with the stock, the impact jarring her spine. Corin's pistol appeared in her periphery. She caught it without thought, firing 3 rounds into the creature's maw. "You owe me a sidearm," he said, already retreating to his tools. She did not thank him. Gratitude was a luxury for the living. The hollow. By midnight, the squad was halved. They retreated to a hollow beneath the spire, its walls streaked with dried venom that glimmered faintly in the dark. Jori tallied their losses, 4 dead, 2 wounded. ration packs torn open, stims administered with trembling hands. A private, barely older than a cadet, retched into his helmet. Corin crouched near the entrance, rewiring a neurothorn cartridge. The barbed projectiles could pierce the EMP nodules, but each shot required manual calibration. His hands were steady, but his breath fogged the visor in ragged bursts. Jori approached, her shadow merging with his. "You should rest. And you should lie better." He did not look up. "Your tells are obvious. The left thumb twitches when you omit details." She flexed the digit, willing it still. "The beacon, can you fix it?" "No," he inserted a filament into the cartridge. "But I can jury-rig a signal booster, use the spire's residue as a conductor." "How long?" "Dawn, perhaps, if the hive does not evolve again." A wry smile ghosted his lips. Jori wondered if he found comfort in the inevitability of adaptation, in the certainty that life, even this grotesque parody of it, would always fight to survive. The private groaned, clutching his abdomen. A shard of chitin protruded from his suit, leaking crimson into the filtration seals. Jori knelt beside him, injecting a coagulant. His eyes met hers, wide with the terror of men who realize they are not heroes. "Look at me," she ordered. "You are a Pathfinder. Your duty is to the next wave, to the ones who will live because you stood here." He nodded, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. Corin watched her, his tools silent for once. "You almost sound like you believe that." She stood. "I have to do." The storm. The third wave came at 300. Not drones, not this time. The ground split like rotten fruit, vomiting a winged horror, a killbox, its segmented body crowned with bone-white artillery spines. It screamed, a subsonic wail that shattered helmet audio feeds and sent the wounded private clawing at his ears. Jori fired, her rounds ricocheting off the creature's armored crest. Corin grabbed her shoulder. "The spines, they are synaptic relays, sever the connections." She nodded, slinging the rifle and drawing her pulse glaive. The weapon's edge shimmered, humming as she charged. The killbox swiveled, a spine detaching with a wet crack. It launched. Jori dove, the spine impaling the ground where she had stood. The glaive's blade found a joint in the creature's underbelly, slicing through corded muscle. Ichor drenched her visor. She blinked it away, hacking again. Corin's voice crackled through her damaged comm. "Jori, the spire, lure it." She understood. Backpedaling, she taunted the creature, her glaive flaring. The killbox lurched after her, spines quivering. Corin stood at the spire's base, his hands buried in a nest of wires. The venomous residue glowed brighter, reacting to his tinkering. Now. She rolled left. The killbox struck the spire, its spines piercing the hexagonal cells. Corin triggered the charge. The explosion was silent at first, a flash of violet light, a shockwave of heatless flame. Then the sound, a roar that stripped the air from Jori's lungs. The killbox disintegrated, its remains scattering like ash. Corin slumped against the spire, his visor cracked. Blood flecked his lips. "Told you, I read the parameters." She hauled him upright. "Save your wit, dawn is coming." He chuckled, wet and raw, optimist. "The edge of dawn." The sky bled orange. Jori stood at the trench's edge, her glaive dimming. The beacon's booster flickered, Corin's masterpiece, cobbled from spire residue and desperation. It would hold. It had to. He limped to her side, his leg brace hissing. "Command will call this a victory." "It is not." "No," he stared at the horizon, "but it is a start." The orbital strike signal pierced the clouds, a single star igniting. Jori did not flinch. She had chosen this. They both had. The ground trembled, not from the hives, but from the sky's answering fury. Corin's hand brushed hers, a fleeting pressure, an unspoken truth. Then the light consumed everything. Chapter 2. The light did not fade. It crystallized, sharp and eternal, searing the sky into a cataract of white fire. Jori Halen's retinas burned even through her helmet's autodim, the afterimage of the orbital strike branded into her vision like a ghostly sun. When the glare finally dissolved, Sekkar's landscape had been remade. The obsidian spire was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater lined with glassified sand. The dunes had flattened, their ashen curves replaced by a jagged plain of fused silica that crackled underfoot. The air stank of ionized metal and cooked chitin. Corin Varek knelt at the crater's edge, his gloves splayed against the vitrified ground. His visor was a mosaic of fractures, his breath fogging the cracks as he scanned the beacon booster's remains. The device, a nest of scavenged wires and spire residue, had survived the blast, but its signal was erratic, a faltering heartbeat on his wrist-mounted display. The strike was a proximity burst, he said, his voice stripped of its usual edge. Command did not want to risk the hive surviving. They incinerated the surface, but not the roots. Jori did not respond. She stood 10 paces away, her pulse glaive still humming in her grip, its blade dulled by dried ichor. Her mind clawed back to the moment before the strike, Corin's hand grazing hers, the unspoken thing between them that the light had scorched into ash. Duty had always been a solitary burden, a spine straightened by protocol. Now it felt fractured, weighted by the memory of his touch. The ground shuddered, not the deep tectonic growl of the hive, but a skittering vibration, insectal and omnidirectional. Jori turned, her boots crunching over the glassine crust. The horizon wavered, heat shimmer giving way to a creeping shadow, a black tide moving against the wind. They adapted, Corin said, rising stiffly. His left leg brace hissed, hydraulic fluid leaking from a joint ruptured during the blast. The hive, they anticipated the strike. They are rising from the periphery. Jori followed his gaze. The swarm was not emerging from the crater. It flowed around it, a river of chitin and serrated limbs circumventing the dead zone, flanking them. Clever, efficient, a collective mind learning from its own annihilation. She reactivated her glaive. We retreat to the canyon, narrow their advance. Corin limped after her, his tools clattering. The canyon is a graveyard. The initial squad's remains are there. The hive will have harvested their tech, their biometrics. Then we deny them further trophies. The word felt foreign, a currency she had never earned. The bone corridors. The canyon was a scar, its walls streaked with fossilized sediment that glimmered like exposed bone. The squad's wreckage lay scattered, a shredded transport pod, a half-melted neurothorn launcher, a helmet still clasping a skull bleached by Sekkar's sun. Jori stepped over a ribcage picked clean by acid, her eyes fixed on the narrowest point of the pass. A natural chokehold, a final stand. Corin crouched beside the neurothorn, his fingers probing its corroded barrel. Biometric lock, keyed to the original operator's DNA. He pried a cartridge loose, the barbed projectile gleaming dully. But the hive has evolved beyond organic triggers. They will not need fingerprints to use our weapons against us. Jori studied the canyon's rim. Shadows pooled there, thick and restless. Can you modify the launcher? To target hive signatures, perhaps, if I had an hour. You have 10 minutes. He laughed, a sound like rusted gears, always with the optimism. While he worked, Jori climbed the western ridge, her boots dislodging shale that clattered into the void. The swarm was closer now, a seething mass a kilometer distant. Not drones this time, but something new, larger creatures, their carapaces studded with biomechanical protrusions. salvaged steel fused to exoskeleton, plasma rifles grafted to clawed limbs. The hive had armed itself. She keyed her calm, "They have our weapons." Corin's reply was distorted, the canyon walls scrambling the signal. Adapt or die, the oldest law. Jori descended, her mind tracing the calculus of survival. The neurothorn could thin the swarm, but each shot required precise calibration. The glaive was close range, suicidal against firearms. Her rifle, if it functioned, had 3 rounds left. She found Corin elbow-deep in the launcher's housing, his visor discarded, sweat gluing his dark hair to his brow. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jawline, a souvenir from his fall from grace, she assumed. He had never spoken of it. "The targeting matrix is hive-aware now," he said, not looking up. "It will seek their pheromone trails, but the recoil will shatter the user's collarbone, maybe worse. I will fire it." "No," he snapped the housing shut. "You are the better fighter. I am the better martyr." She wanted to argue, to cite protocol, rank, the unspoken hierarchy of who deserved to die first. Instead, she tossed him her remaining stims. "Do not miss." The first salvo. The swarm hit at dusk. Corin fired the neurothorn from the canyon's mouth, the recoil slamming him into the transport pod's wreckage. The barbed projectile pierced the lead creature's fused rifle, detonating the plasma cell inside. The explosion tore through the swarm, a chain reaction of cooked chitin and molten steel. Jori moved, her glaive carved through a drone's weaponized limb, severing the stolen rifle before it could fire. Another creature lunged, its carapace bristling with shrapnel. She sidestepped, driving the blade into its sensory cluster. The neurothorn's second shot screamed overhead, obliterating a cluster of drones scaling the eastern wall. Corin reloaded, his shoulder bent at a sickening angle. Jori, the rear. She whirled, a drone emerged from the transport pod's shadow, its mandibles clasping a live grenade. Her glaive bisected its thorax, but the grenade rolled free. She dove, shielding Corin as the blast engulfed them. Heat, pressure, silence. Her audio sensors fizzed back online first. Corin lay beneath her, his breath shallow, his eyes unfocused. Blood seeped from his nose, black in the twilight. "Still, owe me a sidearm," he rasped. She rolled off him, her ribs screaming. The canyon was a charnel house, littered with smoldering hive parts. The neurothorn lay in pieces, destroyed by the grenade. "They will come again," she said. He sat up, wincing, "and we will lack theatrics for the encore." The hollow hours. They retreated deeper into the canyon, where the walls narrowed to a crevice barely wide enough for shoulders. Corin's leg brace failed, forcing him to lean on Jori. His weight was a new intimacy, his breath hot against her neck as they navigated the gloom. A cave loomed ahead, its entrance streaked with bioluminescent fungus. The hive's handiwork, a relay station perhaps, or a trap.
This story continues. Subscribe to our channel, like the video, and listen to the rest.